Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the entertainment headquarters. And it is review time. And the film I'm about to review is for a character that I'm a huge fan of. I do collect, the trade paperbacks of all of the original comic books, as well as the yearly new stories that they've started doing, which is Hellboy and the B.P.R.D. And he has a couple of the latest ones that I have literally just bought. So looking forward to reading them. But yes, Hellboy. If a character that, he's not, on the level of, say, the Marvel superheroes or the DC superhero, he's more or less like an underground kind of superhero kind of comic series that has a really unique, following, similar, I would say, to things like Spawn. And it's something that I've always kind of gravitated to because I am a fan of more of like, gothic kind of horror and gothic kind of horror stories. And the thing with Hellboy is it mixes in a lot of those elements alongside a lot of, things like urban legends, talks a lot about the occult and, Nazis Germany in World War One and Two and things like that. And it brings a lot of like, these hidden stories that you hear from around the world, all these urban legends and all of these kind of stories and mysteries surrounding these mythical creatures and demons and angels and monsters and all of those kind of things, and it brings it all together with Hellboy being kind of in the middle of it all. And I've thoroughly enjoyed the comic book series since it first started, which was created by Mike Mignola, who, as you know, he has a very unique way of creating his comic with his art, his artwork, and his style is very different, I think, to a lot of what I see out there. And he's, worked with DC, he's worked with Marvel, he's done a crossover with Batman in, I believe, for his Hellboy character. And then, of course, a few years ago, we had the fantastic Guillermo del Toro. He is a fan of the comic book Hellboy, and he did his version of the character with Ron Perlman. And when he did his version of the character, he kind of took Hellboy out of kind of this underground world and kind of made him mainstream and polished him up and kind of made it, his films with him larger, bigger in this grand world and kind of give it the Hollywood, take. And then in 2019, after, those films didn't do as well, somebody else give it a go. And we had the David Harper Hellboy 2019, which had more elements of the comic book and kind of stayed true to some of the stories of Hellboy, but didn't quite get there. And it was not well received. That was created by Rob Marshall, who I believe did Dog Soldiers or The Descent. And that had a lot of production bollocks and bullshit around it, and it's David Harper just could not wait to get away from it all, and that was it. We never thought we'd see Hellboy on the big screen or be given another opportunity because them films didn't quite hit the mark that studio executives wanted them to do. But Mike Mignola found a smaller production company and found another director, Brian Taylor, and together they have come up with the idea to basically turn one of Hellboy's most well-known stories from the comic book and bring it to life onto our screens. And I'm talking about Hellboy and the Crooked Man. Now, Brian Taylor's the director this time round. So let's take a quick look at Hellboy, the Crooked Man, and I'll tell you all about my thoughts on this film. So Hellboy, the Crooked Man is a 2024 American superhero horror film based on the Dark Horse Comics character Hellboy, created by Mike Mignola, produced by Millennium Media, Dark Horse Entertainment. It is the second reboot of the Hellboy film series and is the fourth live-action entry in the franchise. Now, it says the fourth live-action entry in the franchise, but yes, Hellboy, The Golden Army, Hellboy 2019. You nearly got us there. Totally forgot about Hellboy, The Golden Army there. So yes, the fourth entry in the live action franchise. It is directed by Brian Taylor from a script he wrote with Mignola and Christopher Golden, adapting the Crooked Man limited series written by Mignola. The film stars Jack Kesy as Hellboy alongside Jefferson White as Adeline Rudolph. Alongside Jefferson White and Adeline Rudolph. Filming began in March 2023 in Bulgaria and was completed in May. So let's have a look at Hellboy, the Crooked Man. So basically the story of Hellboy and the Crooked Man is where you have this village in the Appalachia area, very rural, very foresty, very just, in the woods, away from everything, basically away from modern civilization. And there is villages there, there are witches that live there is a church there, and there is this well-known urban legend and force known as the Crooked Man, who lives there and is, works with Satan, the devil, and basically he tricks people into things and gets their souls and so forth. And during the process of the film, Hellboy is transporting this spider-like creature in a box when suddenly it escapes and the train is derailed in Appalachia, in this rural area, where he comes upon this village that's full of these very mysterious people, the villagers and this kind of cult of witches. And he also finds this church where there's a blind priest, and he basically has to try and solve the mystery of the Crooked Man and rid this village of the Crooked Man, stop these witches, and also protect the priest within the confines of his church. So that's the basis of the story of the Crooked Man that I picked up. The cast in this, Jack Kesy is Hellboy. So this is Jack Kesy's Hellboy. So he, as you know Hellboy. He's this powerful, gentle-natured, heroic demon raised by humans who works for the government organization, the B.P.R.D, which stands for the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense. And he's always placed on these missions. Now, the character behind him there, if I'm sure I got another photo of him, this character here, he is the character of Tom Fennell, and he is played by Jefferson White, and he is an ex-soldier who encounters the Crooked Man during his childhood. So he basically meets Hellboy after the derailing of the train within the confines of the Appalachia area. And Hellboy and I believe the next character, which is this character, here we go. This character here which is played by Adeline Rudolph. This is Bobby Joe's Song, a rookie B.P.R.D agent and Hellboy's partner. Song, she's original character. She's not from the comic books. As you know, in the previous films, they did feature characters from the comic book. You had Selma Blair's character, who had pyrokinetic abilities and created fires and flames. Now, she is in the comic book and she plays a massive part in the spin-off comic book, the B.P.R.D series. She kind of, unlike in the films where they made a love interest to Hellboy, in the actual comic book, she was more or less just his partner, and she basically spanned off into her own series within the B.P.R.D. The name of the character has left my mind because I'm stupid, but this character, which is Bobby Joe's Song, is a new character, and she virtually is Hellboy's rookie partner in this, she's like a duck out of water. She has no clue what is going on. She just reads in the library all day and reads about all these adventures and mysteries that Hellboy goes on, but she's never actually partaked in one until the train's derailed because of this spider entity that escapes. And she ends up in the Appalachians with Hellboy against a village of witches and the Crooked Man. So they're the three main characters, and then you have the two side characters, which are the villains throughout the course of the story. So the next character, of course, is the character played by Leah McNamara. I had to read this on Wikipedia so I didn't get her name wrong. Leah McNamara, who plays Effie Kolb. Now, I love this character in the comic book. Now, this is a character from the comic book, and this is the character of Effie Kolb. Now, she is the acolyte of the Crooked Man. She's like a witch, but she's also, she's very she's like an nymphomaniac witch. She'll basically lure men into the domain of Appalachians and the Crooked Man, and basically seduces them, where in return she tricks them into giving their souls to the Crooked Man. And he is the main villain, the Crooked Man, who is played by Martin Bassindale. It's Jeremiah Watkins, aka the Crooked Man, a supernatural entity haunting the Appalachian Mountains. And so there's your main characters, that's your main plot. They're derailed in the Appalachians, they're stuck within this village of witches and followers. He's got hundreds of female witches that are basically part of this cult-like thing. Oh, I forgot, you also have the Reverend, who is played by, who was the Reverend played by? Joseph Marcell as Reverend Nathaniel Armstrong. He's a religious pastor who is blind, that basically is confined to the church, as the church and the graveyard around it is sacred ground and nobody really can enter if you've committed sin or witchcraft of any of that nature. So he's basically confined in this church. And as the story progresses, Hellboy and Song have to solve the mystery to free everything. And honestly, it was such an interesting film. And I quite frankly am still kind of stuck on how I feel about it, because it doesn't have the budget of Guillermo del Toro's films. He had the big Hollywood budget. He made it bigger, he made it flashier, he made it cleaner, he made it more or less, tried to make it a mysterious, kind of not gothic, but he tried to make it very much like a Hellboy film with a Marvel universe type feel. he really kind of fleshed it up. Then when he went and did the second one, he made that more, tried to make it more with the lore, with these, you know, these elements of the backstory of the prince, and made it feel in the dark elf kind of element. He kind of give it like a larger world feel and more like a supernatural tone to it. And unfortunately, it didn't work. And then, of course, the 2019 version is just a complete disaster. As for this version, it feels as if that Mike Mignola was finally allowed to take what was on his page of his comic book and put it onto screen. And it works for a lot of ways. It works, sorry. But then it also feels as if there are just elements in this that, you know, it doesn't have the budget. It's very much a low budget film, and it feels more like a fan movie than a, you know, studio movie. It definitely doesn't feel like a movie that could go to theaters. I know in some areas it did go to theaters. I think it went to theaters in Bulgaria because I believe it was filmed there. It went to theaters in the UK in September, but I don't think it's had a theatrical release anywhere else, and I can understand why. The budget isn't great in this. The look of Hellboy himself, I actually don't mind. I actually think he looks more or less like Ron Perlman. So I've got some photos, yeah. So Ron Perlman, there you go, all suited and booted, looks fantastic. He's definitely like the Hellboy that everyone loves. Then you have the David Harbour version, which for me, it just didn't fit. Like, I love David Harbour, but the look that they give him just didn't work. Then if you look obviously at Jack Kesy here, he looks fantastic. I think he looks like the son of Ron Perlman in this, of his version of Batman. I was going to say his version of Hellboy. I think he's great. So one thing I'll say that they got right with this is despite the low budget, despite it feeling like a fan-made film, they got the story right. The story was right. The casting is brilliant. I think the casting did fantastic. I really believed in all of the casting, all of the roles that they had. The story, like I say, was fantastic for me. One thing I loved about the story of this is it feels like how when Sam Raimi had no budget at all and he came out with a banger with Evil Dead. Now, Evil Dead has obviously spawned a franchise, spawned a series, and did really, really well. This, I don't think, is going to do that, but I definitely see influences of Evil Dead in this. I see how Mike Mignola was allowed to just write his version, his definitive version of Hellboy, and finally bring it to the screen. Whether this gets a sequel or not, who knows? I don't think it will, because I don't know if it's earned enough or has done well enough to get a sequel, but I think in the long run he would be happy if they never made Hellboy ever again on the big screen, because he's finally been able to make his version of Hellboy, because they've taken what's on the page and brought it to screen. And I think visually, yes, you can tell it's low budget, but there are areas in this where some of the scenes and the cinematography, the tone of this is very more horror and fits the bill with Hellboy in the comic book. Now, if anyone's read any of the comic book of Hellboy, there is some very much graphic horror scenes in this, grotesque horror scenes, people, things bursting out of people's chests, death scenes in comic books, very graphic, and you don't get that in the Del Toro films. In this, there are some really great horror scenes like this one. This, for me, was taken from Evil Dead, 100%. Taken from Evil Dead. Looks brilliant, worked brilliantly. Like I say, the beginning of the movie, some of the CGI was a bit iffy. But as the film progresses, the CGI and the tone, the look, the lighting, the atmosphere, the overall element of horror and tension works, and definitely feels like a true blue horror version of Hellboy. But because it feels also like a fan-made film, I think it also it won't hit the mark for mainstream audiences. And I think because it does feel like a fan-made film and is on a low budget, I also feel as if they tried to do too much all at the same time to really get this out there. This film feels too long for what it is. I think that's one of its downfalls. It does drag slightly, and a lot of the plot building I think they could have done in a shorter time period, and I think that's its biggest issue. I love the beginning of the movie with the train, the derailing of the train. I love the introduction to the village of witches. I love the introduction to the crooked man and the elements, there is some more elements to Hellboy's story with flashbacks to his birth and stuff like that. And, then it kind of gets to the point midway where things just seem to drag. And you've explained at the beginning of the movie, you find out what's going on. This crooked man's basically in charge of, in his if the Appalachian Mountain area. He has his villager witches doing his bidding. You've got this young man who's come back from the war, who's trapped in it all. You've got this reverend who's trapped in this church. Outside of that, once you know them elements, it's all about trying to free them all and to stop the crooked man. So they have these other elements in the film, like flashbacks with Hellboy, little flashbacks with the character of back to his childhood, the character of Tom Ferrell, the ex-soldier. You have elements with him where he has a connection with Effie Kolb, how she was involved with him with his childhood and trying to lure him to the crooked man. Some of them elements I think could have been chopped up and missed out. And it feels as if they had maybe chopped some elements out of this and just made it an hour and 10-minute, hour and 20-minute movie, I think this would work a hell of a lot better. But it drags. That's the biggest issue I have. It kind of drags on too long. But the horror elements are great in this. The cast were great in this. The tone, the feel of this is pure Hellboy from the comic book, straight from the page, straight to screen. So those bits all work despite the low budget. And if I had one other negative to say about this, the negative I would say is because of the budget, I kind of rolled my eyes at the beginning of the movie with some of the spider scenes. There's a great death scene right at the beginning with this spider creature, which I'll not spoil, but when it happens, you'll be like, whoa, that was cool. But when they initially get off this train and they escape the initial crash of the derailing and they're chasing after this spider thing, some of the scenes with the spider feels like it could have been from Asylum. The Asylum Studios, who does all these kind of piss take of Hollywood movies, like Transformers. They did their ridiculous one. They did like the piss take version of the Godzilla movies and like War of the Worlds. So some of the CGI just with that particular scene at the beginning, I was like, oh god. But once you get past those elements and you then onto the main part of the story, and it picks up with the horror and the tenseness and the atmosphere in it and the tone that works. Like I say, they're my two big nitpicks. So on to ratings, if I'm going to rate Hellboy, the Crooked Man, I would probably have to rate this 6 out of 10. I think that's a fair rating. It's nowhere, you know, polished or on the level of the Del Toro films. But where this wins, where those failed, is story in horror and tone and atmosphere and making you believe in the horror elements, where the other two versions of Hellboy that came out prior were aimed at a mainstream audience. They weren't there for the fans, and this feels like it's been made for the fans, which is what I like about it. But like I say, because it does have the budget restraints, and because I do think it drags a bit, that's the thing that lets this down. But overall, did I enjoy this? Yes. Yes, I did. I did still enjoy it because this is a Hellboy film for the fans, made by its creator, Mike Mignola, and was given, and I'm just glad he had an opportunity to make his version of Hellboy. And the Crooked Man is a well-known villain throughout the comic book lore, outside of Rasputin. And I think there's the Baba Yaga. There's, and you know, yeah, you've got other villains in the Hellboy lore that could have been used. But if this did do well, and they do have the opportunity to do another Hellboy movie with the same cast, with the same tone, feel, I would look forward to it and welcome it. I really would. But like I say, it does feel like not just a low-budget Hellboy film. It feels like a fan-made Hellboy film. And a lot of people might like that. A lot of people might like the fact it feels fan-made, that it is a fan film. And I did like some of those elements. I could tell them elements were in this. But yes, 6 out of 10 for me. But if you're a fan of Hellboy, let me know if you've seen this and what you think. Let me know how you feel about Hellboy as a character, as a comic book, as the film series. Let me know. But Hellboy and the Crooked Man, 6 out of 10 for me. Great job by Mike Mignola. I'm finally glad he got to make his version of Hellboy. And I hope people do give this a chance, despite it being like on a lower budget and not the Hollywood mainstream version. I do believe every film at least deserves to get at least one screening, including, I hate to say it, The Crow remake, which also got panned. I took a chance on it, and yes, I still panned it as well, but at least I give it one viewing. I don't have to see it again now I've seen it. But this might surprise a lot of people. It might be a film that, you know, they go into thinking this is going to be pure garbage and walk out surprised, because I will say that I was surprised. Didn't hate it. Thought it was great for what it is, and like I say, it's Mike Mignola's version of Hellboy. But until next time, keep on loving your movies, keep on loving all things entertainment, and I'll catch us all at the next one.